Concerning the question of how I began my healing ministry in the month of May 1947, when I was 29, I had been struck down with tuberculosis when I was 17, and I was not a Christian. And through that terrible experience and the witnessing of my parents, my preacher father and mother, and my sister and brothers, I had a moment when the Lord touched my heart to be saved. It didn't happen until the doctors, all three doctors, said I only had a matter of days to live. And I faced death before I ever lived life. And if you've not had an experience like that, it's hard to describe what comes over you when you realize that you're going to go out and you don't know where you're going. Just because I was a preacher's son didn't mean I knew, because I had not accepted my Father's Christ. But in that salvation experience while I was bedfast, I got a very deep salvation. When I accepted the Lord, I really accepted him. It was not a little quick thing. It engulfed my life, my being, and it started the miracle. My family got around me, and then we learned there was a man praying for the sick and come into our county, which had never happened. And they carried me there. And I got my healing. And on the way, lying in the back seat of the car, I'd been hemorrhaging real badly, and I was in much pain in my chest. I'd never heard the Lord. I grew up with parents who talked to the Lord. They'd wake up in the mornings real early, 4:30, and if I woke up, I'd hear them talking to Jesus. As a little boy, there were times I thought Jesus lived at our house, for they were just talking to him. And but I had never heard the Lord's voice. I didn't know what it was. But as my brother talked about that evangelist praying for the sick and telling about some of the healings he had seen, I was listening. I was listening, because now then it was life or death for me, because when the doctors told me they had nothing for me, it's really a strange feeling when everything in life fails and you're caught up in it. I was lying there listening to my brother, and I heard this, what we call now the still small voice inside me. Son, I'm going to heal you. And you're to take my healing power to your generation. And you're to build me a university based on my authority and the Holy Spirit. And the first thought that ran through my mind, what is this? And I remember saying, Lord, is this you talking to me? If it is, would you say it again? And the very same words came. And then I said, Lord, if it really, really is you, say it the third time. And I remember how it went deep inside me. Son, I'm going to heal you. And you're to take my healing power to your generation. and someday you're to build me a university based on my authority in the Holy Spirit. Well, I did not really understand what he was saying, except I heard it. There wasn't a doubt in my mind what I had heard. And the only thing that had came to me besides what I just said was, I'm going to be healed tonight when that brother lays hands on me. And when he did, the power of God went through my lungs like electricity going through your body. And they opened. And all the coughing and hemorrhaging was gone. And I'd been born a stutterer. And it was a terrible, terrible experience not to be able to talk. And God released my talking. And they took me back home. And in the days to follow, it was like at 17, I was in a dream. I knew something had happened, but I didn't know much more than that. And each afternoon, I would take off my clothes, put my pajamas back on when I was bedfast, because even though I got my healing, I didn't get all my strength. And Mama really saved my healing. She said, Oral, don't put on your pajamas and get under the covers like you used to. Keep your clothes on and lie on top of the bed for your nap. And your strength will come, and don't doubt that you're healed. Because I hadn't been coughing, my lungs were clear, and I was talking. So I knew I was healed, but there was a time or two or three that I wasn't quite sure I was healed, because my strength had not come yet. And so I did what Mama said. She also said, you've got to start walking and moving about and using your body. And I started doing that. And then I felt the call to preach. God never said, I've called you to preach. I just felt in my heart that I was called to preach. And when I got strong enough, and my daddy was doing some evangelistic work for churches, he asked me to go with him and start preaching little sermons, with him. And I did that. And my strength started coming. And my words began to come. And of course, I began to devour the Bible. The first thing I did after my conversion was to memorize all 66 books of the Bible, forwards and backwards. And during that time, when my strength came up, and I was able to have a ministry that began to amount to something, Papa would have me preach every other night. And we'd get to churches, and Papa was a mature preacher. They wanted him to do the preaching, and they didn't want me to preach at all. So that really bothered me. And in addition to that, the little money that people gave preachers then, my dad, as a preacher, never had any money, and he never gave me any money. And so with the preacher shutting the door to me, and Papa not, when they gave him the offering, he didn't give me even 10 cents. And it all hit me hard. And one day I just walked out to the highway and had my little bag, and I put my thumb up, and my dad drove up. He said, "What are you doing out here, Oral?" And I told him why. That these preachers wouldn't let me preach, And he didn't give me anything when I did preach. And I had a few experiences like that since too. And so it touched my dad, and he said, we'll change that. So he said to the preachers, you either take my son and me, or you don't have me. And then he began to share the offerings with me when I preached. Well, I was 17, 4 years later. I fell in love with Evelyn, and we started a wonderful marriage. And I was on my own, and I joined a Pentecostal church that believed in everything about healing and the Holy Spirit and speaking in tongues. But they believed it better than they did it. There wasn't much healing. I never remember seeing a healing in those 4 years. I saw a lot of praying for people. I didn't see a healing. And they preached in tongues a lot, but I didn't hear much speaking in tongues. And so after I married Evelyn, I went back to school because I had to quit when I was in the bed with TB. I enrolled in college, and this was a Baptist university that had some remarkable professors who knew the Bible, and I began to soak it in. But they were not into healing or tongues. And then I began to pastor small churches, and for 12 years, I continued doing just what I told you. Wherever I pastored, there was a college I would enroll and try to get my education, and I would preach, and I'd preach about healing, but there was no healing. I remembered what Jesus said to me, that I would take his healing power to my generation, but I made no connection. I made a connection with my denomination, and I made a very serious mistake. I didn't know better, though, so God didn't hold it against me, because I became like they were. Soon I quit thinking about the healing and the speaking in tongues. I'd received the Holy Spirit, spoke in tongues once or twice, and they said, well, you may never speak again. So I didn't. So I was halfway between my work at the university and my work in the church. And then it was like you'd been asleep and you'd overslept and you woke up. And all of those words came back to me about the healing I was to have with people and for my generation. Then I got dead serious. And I began to seek out friends, preachers, others. And if they were interested, I could not tell it. I mean, they made no impression on me when I asked them, would they advise me, would they help me? And I know they meant no harm. It was just one of those times in the history of the church in the late 40s when it was like the church, the Pentecostal church, had had a great beginning. And then there came like a surcease from sorrow. It was like the air went out of the tire, and there wasn't much happening. And I was caught between what the awakening experience I was having. I was devouring my Bible. I was calling on God. I was in a strait betwixt two. Should I quit? Should I give it all up? And then I had a remarkable experience. At 4 o'clock, there was a loud knock on the door. I went and opened the door, and there was a man named Art Newfield, who was a member of our little church. and he was a big wheat farmer. And I didn't know him well, but I knew him. And he apologized for waking me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but he said, "Can I come in?" I said, "Sure." And he walked in, and he just said, "Look." And he said the words that changed my life. 1947. He said, "Pastor, this is not just money. This is seed. You know that I'm a farmer, and I've been neglecting planting. I've been playing the stock market. I'm losing my shirt, and I'm planting seed to save my farm and for me to get back to do what I've been doing, get out of the stock market." And he left. That God took my mind back as a 14-year-old boy on the farm, where I'd helped my dad plow the fields and plant the seed of cotton and corn and other things. I remembered how important it was when it was seed planting time. It was a big time in our family. And then we did what we call laid the crop by for 6 or 8 weeks while the seed would go up and become cotton and corn. And we'd go out and pick the cotton, and Papa would go into town and pay off the bank from whom he had borrowed money to plant the seed. We'd pay our bills, buy our winter groceries and our winter clothes. And harvest time was the greatest time of our year. We had something. We had money. We had new clothes. We had food. And all that wished fliced through my mind. And seed faith was revealed to me that night.